Okay, good morning. What are we doing today? Today we are continuing, as you can see, with Hex Command starships. Um, we have been discussing the fleet action concept, and the truth of the matter is, it's impossible. Why? Um, long story short, in space, navies are not going to behave the way we think they're going to behave. The way we've seen them in movies is hardly acceptable. I don't care what the movie is or the TV show, it doesn't matter. It's all showing it incorrectly, every bit of it. The fleet actions would never happen the way they're being shown. What? So why do it? Well, the answer is you have to do it somehow. Now, there are some games out there, some board games, that attempt to show a mass fleet. And the reason is everybody likes the cast of thousands look. In other words, on a stand, you might have 3 fighter ships, and on a stand, a proportionately sized, relatively speaking, of course, capital ship. Well, there's issues, of course. It's like what I've always said. You want to see something. Like we want to see Zouaves in the American Civil War with turbans. Why? Because it just looks cool. But they never wore them. They wore them on the parade, the ground. They wore them so on. They didn't wear them in battle. And if they did, they didn't last because it was impractical. Well, then why did they do it in the Crimea? Different story. Okay, but didn't they? Did they last in Crimea? I don't think so. Right? You want to think they did, but it's hard to say because the turbine it might serve other purposes. It might be a wrap for sandstorms, dust storms. It might protect you in that case. But turbines in the United States, not at all practical. So we want to see the turbines on the Zouaves, so I'm in the process of making them. But they weren't used. So in Hex Command Starships or in any Starships game for that matter, we want to see those ships out there. But so how does that happen? Again, abstractly, okay? First of all, in reality, the distance between the ships would be so enormous. You would never have a capital ship. Just imagine the size of an aircraft carrier today. Within 500 miles, or even more than that, less than that, you would never have a capital ship next to another capital ship unless it was separated by probably hundreds of thousands of miles. Why would that be? Because it would be logistically risky for any capital ship in space to be positioned so close, relatively speaking, to another capital ship. Well, why couldn't they be just 100 kilometers? Well, let's put it this way. Imagine 2 capital ships on the ocean, and they're 100 kilometers apart. First of all, in our day, if they were firing traditional kinetic weapons, how far do those weapons fire? The USS New Jersey, 18-inch guns. What was the range of those guns? I think, ironically, it was like 18 kilometers. May have been more. May have been 25 kilometers. Okay? For the range of those kinetic projectile weapons. Okay. Assuming that all things being equal, the 2 ships to engage each other would have to be within range of their guns. Okay. In space, what is the range of the gun? Talk amongst yourselves. That's right. It's unlimited. Unlimited. The only thing that's going to affect a kinetic projectile weapon is gravity. In other words, or other spatial phenomenon. Okay? So, when you fire a bolt of iron, lead, whatever, titanium, when you fire a shell, nothing is going to stop it until it hits something. There will be effects on it caused by gravity. Now, is there gravity in space? Around objects, yes. Space objects, not man-made floating, okay? Celestial objects, stars, planets, everything has gravity except what we put up there. Our capital ships floating up there would not have any gravity. But the gravity exists. It's just minuscule until you get close enough to a orb, okay? A planet, a star system. So 500,000 miles away, you've got your battleship and your long-range sensors. Who knows if they're even long-range at that point? They could just say sensors, because it could be millions of miles sensor. Okay, you detect an enemy ship. Okay, 2, 3, 5 options: torpedoes, kinetic bolts, beams. But you know, what's the range of a beam weapon? Okay, and over time, or over space, I should say, over distance, energy weapons are going to dissipate. That's true. But kinetic weapons don't. They just have the same speed unless something acts on them. They come out of that barrel. Hence the reason they could be pretty nasty. Well, so what about rockets, missiles? Well, they have fuel. And do they need to spend their fuel all the time to get to the... No. To get to the target? No. They just need to have their engines fired once for the burn necessary to create the speed that's desired. So they just have to go poof, and that missile, torpedo, it's gone. You don't need to fire the engine again. Unless it detects a reason to engage the engine or the thrusters of that torpedo. Yeah, because they're going to be smart torpedoes by this time, right? If torpedoes even exist at all, they're going to be like floating ships. Why wouldn't they be? What is to stop a torpedo from becoming a smart torpedo? Or a shell from becoming a smart shell? Okay? It has maneuvering thrusters. Why would it? You're in space. Okay, so what's the distance? It could be millions of miles between the two capital ships. It would never be like 50 miles. That's way too close. Why? Because you need to have the you need to have the maneuvering distance, even for a ship that's half a mile long. This is you know, just Occam's razor kind of a thing. Just say it's like 500 feet. 500 feet in space is going to require probably 30 miles at minimum, or kilometers, of space around it. Okay, so let's just default to that. Say it's 50 kilometers. All right, you got to have a space of 50 kilometers. Why? Because you have to have stopping distance. Well, that brings up another thing, right? Where are the engines located on these capital ships? They're in the back, right? No, they're all around it. Maneuvering thrusters and space full thrust thrusters, both in the front and in the back. How about left and right? Yeah, not so much probably. Just, you know, maneuvering thrusters, left, right, center, up, down, inside, out, whatever. But the engines themselves, probably front and back. Otherwise, you got to turn the ship around, slow down. In other words, you got to take, here's your ship, and you're going that way. Okay, so here's the ship. Now you want to thrust this way so you can slow down. Well, you got to turn the ship. So now your ship's facing this way, and you start the burn, and now your ship is slowing down. This is all based on our conventional thinking of engines. If we're talking about UFO technology, right, it is a concept of maneuver in the space-time doesn't require engines. It's simply a matter of, yes, we're talking about hyperspace movement. You're talking about an object. Now, this is not, well, we don't really know the distance involved. It could just be a couple million miles to go from blinking here to blinking there, right? I mean, you could do it in an instant, a split second. Depending on your sophistication and navigation involved, there's no more thrusting jets. There's no more maneuvering jets. You're basically playing like the video game Asteroids. When you hit the hyperspace button, you just go boop, boop, and then you pop it somewhere else. That's all there is to it when it comes to the so-called UFO technology, because you're traveling in hyperspace. You're opening up a portal immediately and traveling through that portal to another place you've already calculated. And I know it's complicated, because how does that work? But regardless, capital ship, right? It goes, okay, let's go to Jupiter. Bloop, bloop, you're in Jupiter. I mean, it's a matter of seconds. Not even. It's split seconds. Because it has nothing to do with distance. It has nothing to do with time. It's all about that matrix of space-time that we don't really, well, we aren't really informed that much about. We can only suppose. And all the writers and people, yeah, oh, this is how it's going to work and all that. Well, the truth of the matter is, from the visual evidence we've seen of, if anything, that the so-called UFO, UAP technology provides us to understand is that there is some kind of a warping of space-time that enables something in terrestrial space, flying normally, but in outer space, or even actually in terrestrial space as well, it just goes bleep. It blinks out. Did it go invisible? No, it's actually gone. Physically, the object that was there is now gone. It has gone and lies somewhere else, we don't know where. That's why when people see and have these experiences, it looks like it just goes zoop. Or you might say, oh, it's traveling so fast that it looks like it just flew away. Well, that isn't entirely true. Because what's happening is it's just winking out of existence. Yeah, it's hard to believe, but it's actually true, right? The theories are actually applicable. It may look like it's going, phew, but in reality, what it's doing is it is distorting itself to travel to another, location. Why is this all important? Why am I rambling? Because when you think about the big capital ship navies out in space, these are the things you need to think about. Well, how do you play that, Terry? Come on. How do you do? What kind of game is that? So, you have to accept that if you want to play a game with turbines, on the Zouave figure in the American Civil War, and you want to see him out west and not out east. You want to see him in the Western Theater, because this is where I'd like to see him. Because the East gets everything. I mean, the East even had the 8th Pennsylvania Cavalry Lancers. They didn't have Lancers out west. Like to see them. Well, of course, it wasn't practical. They didn't have them. But I'd still like to see them. Well, all right. You like to see, one horse riding on top of another horse, right? Just so it's, gets double the distance. Anyway, the abstractness of the capital ship action has to be more of system action. It's planetary system, planetary system. Planetary system, planetary system. In other words, yes, what I'm talking about is the old fallback concept, campaign, if you will, of the Excalibur board game, which we have already adapted to a space opera. And that is the point. So a game of mass capital ship activity on a game table is really kind of hard to grasp, unless it's completely wrong, just because you want to see it. Just put the ships out there and play. It has nothing to do, absolutely zero. Fine. Then, Red Alert or whatever the other game was, whatever, fine, play that. And Star Wars, you want to see all those ships out there and they're all just flying around and beating each other up, yeah, fine. But it has nothing to do with reality. And that's what we're talking about. So, kind of feels like a newscast, or I feel like Rachel Maddow. But that is this is essentially the gist of what I'm talking about. And are we ever going to get around to doing a capital ship thing? No, I don't think so. I think we're probably going to do like the campaign map of Excalibur, Starfield. So it would be planetary systems, and each marker or each object, each toy on its stand would represent a capital navy. And it has all these capabilities. Just give it a number 5. So this 5 Navy has, this 6 Navy over here, and they're both going to go to some, brimstone star system, and they're going to duke it out. Do you even bother? No, it's just like one thing versus one thing, and be done with it. Oh wow, that was a horrible battle. That was like, the Jutland. We never saw it. It just happened. We just rolled the dice, right? 6 versus 5, whatever. Okay, who won? Well, that's star system. Now you want to do that in miniature? You want to do that actual conflict? The game table's not big enough. It could be big enough. You could be 100 feet long. And those two, realistically speaking, those two capital ship navies, they would probably never see each other. If you wanted to do it, though, just if you wanted to do it on an 8x5 table, okay. So just put it out there and play and fine. Just accept the fact that there's no way that's going to be the reality. So that's enough of this rant. I don't even know if I'll even post this, but you get the idea.